do that here. I met with the mayor of Knoxville today talking about this thing. You could do that here. You can do it in any city. Atlanta is already doing one. There are 3 being done in Washington, D.C. area. There's one being done in Pittsburgh. There's one being done in Amarillo, Texas. And there's about 10 cities that are on the design boards right now to do something like that, and about 100 more are making serious inquiries into it, Milwaukee, Chicago, etc. So what is that all about? What you're seeing is, in my opinion, that problems not soluble because the political economic power structure will not solve it in the old way. And people under great pain, either you innovate in some way that happens to involve changing the ownership patterns and the power relationships, who gets to own the wealth, or the pain continues. The pain continues. And it is very painful in cities like Detroit and some of those cities. So that is actually happening in many parts of the United States. Maybe one element, possibly, of the preconditions of the next thing like the New Deal and applications to the national level. Maybe, we'll see. But it's happening in lots of parts of the country and not only there. So I'll give you a couple more examples. But that particular one is very interesting in another respect. Remember where the historians had and the political economists had. Because it turns out that the Steelworkers Union has also evolved. Ain't like it used to be. The new leadership of the Steelworkers Union is promoting worker-owned companies and trying to set them up all over the country using the power of the Steelworkers Union to do that. And they've been influenced by the Mondragon phenomenon. How many people know about Mondragon? Not too many, so let me give you the short version. Mondragon, and hey, you all ought to read about this because it's very hot right now. So you want to, this is real hot stuff. When I wrote the book, some people, I think, used America Beyond Capitalism, a book I wrote a couple of years ago, and I mentioned Mondragon. I said, you know, Americans haven't been interested in foreign models very much. Not anymore. Well, Mondragon is in the Basque region of Spain. It is the most sophisticated worker-owned cooperative structure in the world. 85,000 people, high-tech, operating in the world market, operating effectively in Europe, and everything from supermarkets to high-tech medical equipment to construction. There are 85 different subdivisions of it in cooperative structure. It is a powerful multinational corporation, but it's all cooperative. And participatory design, participatory decision-making, really interesting. And it's being studied to death now by people and trying to model on it, the Mondragon phenomenon. You got anybody interested in stuff, take a look at Mondragon because it's very hot. So here's another feature of it. It is a very effective, highly competitive, very efficient, and high-tech, and winning. And here's what the income ranges are. In 90% of there are 85 sub-corporations, sub-co-ops within the large co-op. In 85% of them, roughly speaking, the ratio of income top to bottom is 6:1. Do you know what the ratio of income in American corporations is? 300 to 400 to 1 in many corporations. And these guys are beating them. They're competitive. Now, it is true that in about 5 or 6 of the larger corporations in the Mondragon co-ops, there is a different ratio, 8:1. So, you know, take a look at that. Just throw it in your lap. Here it is, cooperative structure, very participatory, ownership of the means of production, and beating many other corporations at their own game in a participatory way with high tech. Now that's interesting. Now, Cleveland doesn't quite look like that, though we stole some ideas from the Mondragon revolving fund, but it gives you a suggestion, and a lot of people around the country that aren't covered by the press in what's now being called the new economy movement are very, very hip about all this. They are learning about things like that and saying, how could we do it here? So how could we get, for instance, I was asked, you know, did I have policy ideas? Here's one for you. Some states can set up, Ohio used to have one, there are a couple states left that don't, most states don't have them. You can set up in the governor's office or as a state institution a little place that helps policy development for worker-owned companies. There used to be 10 or 12 states that did that, got wiped out in the Reagan era. But just technical assistance is very effective in doing that. So it's a really simple one. A second one would be policy to finance them. Loans and loan guarantees or using public money, public finance, technically to support this. And I think that's going to be the next step around the country, just in this area. So I won't go down that track very far, but you get the idea that in this particular area, and in the land trust development, you're beginning to see very interesting developments. In the book I just published, What Then Must We Do, you will find endless examples of these. They involve social enterprise development, that is businesses that are in business only to do a social service. That's exploding around the country. B Corps. How many know what a B Corps is? It's a particular form of business. Many states have now adopted laws to establish B Corp forms. But what is a B Corp? If you are a businessman and you set up a company and you're an officer of the company and you start using corporate money for social purposes, your shareholders can attack you because that ain't what the company's supposed to do. It's not in business to make, you can do a little bit for public relations purposes, but you start doing it in a serious way, you can be sued by the shareholders. That's corporate law. And indeed, Ben & Jerry's, you also have to take the highest offer if somebody tries to buy you up. So they got an offer from, I can't remember, who knows? Unilever. Unilever bought them and had no interest in the values that Ben & Jerry had. And legally, they had to sell them to them because that was the best offer. So a B Corp is a corporation that by law is established that has a social purpose by law, so that if you become a shareholder, you know what the game is. This one is going to do social purposes. There are many states are setting up B Corps now. And there's a whole entrepreneurial side of this, entrepreneurs who want to do this. And then there's another piece of this, part of the business community, part of that 1%, part of it, a significant part, are interested in what's called impact investing. Anybody know what impact investing is? Impact investing, there's somebody in the back who knows about this stuff. Impact investing is when investors, or it's sometimes called slow capital, are willing and interested and want to invest in companies that will have a social purpose and maybe not make the same return on their investment. There's a conscious, social conscience, but it changes ownership structure as well. I was asked to do a keynote conference of 1,700 of these out in California last year. And there's another big one happening next month in Southern California. One organizations to know about, SOCAP, Social Capital, that's one group. And what is it, Social Venture Network? That's the other one. He's nodding, he knows it. I'm speaking to that one next. There is an explosion of interest in building up community development of this kind. So, I won't go on that track, but my analysis and my suggestion to you is that there is something, mainly pain, mainly frustration, mainly inability to get old solutions the old way, that is forcing the development of what might become the prehistory of the next great change, like the prehistory of the New Deal. Maybe. We could come back to that if we had time, but that's one way to look at it. In a totally different area, I'm going to give you 3 or 4 and then I'm not going to take too much more of your time. In a totally different area, there's a whole other thing going on with banking. So, how many know about the Bank of North Dakota? Bank of North Dakota is a very conservative state. North Dakota, in the middle of that state, has a socialist bank. You didn't know that. Most people, except a few hands went up. The state owns a bank. Been there for 93 years. Farmers love it, small businessmen love it, and the co-ops love it. It makes a lot of money for the state. And there it is, very American, down-home America. And there are people who discovered, hey, we could do that. You guys could do that. How do you do it? You got to organize and build and organize. And, you know, it's not easy, but nonetheless, there are 20 states where there's active agitation and development of plans to replicate the Bank of North Dakota to help finance this kind of stuff. Several cities are beginning to use their finances in Nebraska, Kansas, but also San Francisco and Los Angeles to help finance. You know, the city's got a lot of tax money. What do you think it does with it? Normally, it drops it in the big bank, Bank of America, or any big bank. It can put it in a credit union. It can put it in a public bank. It could put it in a bank that promises to invest locally. And virtually all those techniques are now hot in many cities. Some want to do it more radically, some want to do it less radically. Promise to invest a certain percentage in low-income areas. We'll put our money in we'll make our deposits. So they're beginning to get interested in finance. It's another piece of the puzzle. And then there is discussion of an infrastructure bank nationally, and there's a discussion of a big bank of some kind nationally. There's a beginning development of expertise. We need expertise. We need to know how to do a good bank rather than a dumb bank. And that means we need finance professors who can help us really structure these things well. And then you're beginning to see a couple of these guys emerge. because there's so much pain and because they care, so that's another piece of this. And most of it is greed. And I don't have time to go into great detail about all these other areas, but that's another piece. And I'm going to give you 2 or 3 more and then talk about a couple national things and then I'll shut up at a certain point. Here's another piece. Quite different. So what I'm suggesting to you is possibly at the level of locality, and now I've just moved to the state level, there is a process underway that is being generated by the failures of the existing power structure. And its main characteristic is changing ownership of wealth in a productive way, but in a very American way, very decentralized, very down home, very community building. It doesn't look like communism or state socialism, but it does change who gets to own the wealth. Maybe. We'll see how far it goes and what the pain drops. At the state level, that's beginning also. And in addition to the banking sector, there is a really important phenomenon going on with a very different dynamic. And that has to do with healthcare. We talked about it at dinner, somebody at dinner. The healthcare system, most of you probably know the healthcare system in the United States produces the worst outcomes in the advanced industrial world by every single indicator. Child health, age, maternal, almost every indicator, we are bottom line. We are the bottom of the list. And we pay just about twice the share of GDP for our healthcare system than any other system. We pay right now about 18% of the economy goes to healthcare. And we get the worst results. And many other countries are in the 8 to 10% range, 11% range, and get much better outcome results. I mean, it's a really rotten system. I mean, by any standard, it is broken, except the power structure holds it together. So, in some states, what is beginning to happen, in my opinion, is likely to continue to happen, is that the cost problems and the pain associated with, a lot of people are going to lose health care, as well as people in great pain. Some states are beginning to realize that and are going to, their only available solution is either the pain increases or you do a single payer system, which is Medicare for all. And there are several states, 21 by our last count, that are really beginning actively to consider single payer at the state level, slowly and agonizingly being built up. California passed it twice and Schwarzenegger vetoed it. Vermont is doing it right now. Connecticut is probably next. Several states. But I'm not talking about just because activists like it. There are reasons in the conditions that are forcing this. I just said something really weird, though, because if the healthcare system begins to move in that direction over this 30-year period, I just said 30 years. If you want to do this, throw a couple decades on the table. That's what historic changes about pre-New Deal. If over that period the healthcare system goes, and I think it will, in part also because big corporations don't like it. They're in competition with European companies that don't pay for healthcare. And also, if you look closely at the healthcare system, you find that the doctors are one scheme, the pharmaceutical companies are another, the insurance companies are another. They're not quite as united as you think. And the cost structure is part. If I give you a long discussion, there's a longer discussion in my book. That system is in decay, and in my opinion, is going to slowly move over to some form of single payer, because it's the only way to solve the cost problem. If you believe what I just said 20% of the American economy is going to be socialized. Plus the worker ownership stuff. Plus the banks. Somebody raised the word socialism at dinner. I didn't, what are you talking about, man? So there is a very American populist kind of thing going on that, if it is to proceed, has very interesting ramifications. So that's the second level, second order. I talked about community stuff. I gave you a sketch. Now we're talking about state banks and state health care. Did you happen to notice that we nationalized 2, 3 big companies over the last couple of years? Did you notice? America. We nationalized companies. We nationalized General Motors, we nationalized Chrysler, sort of. We nationalized AIG, the largest insurance company in the world. We still own it. You own AIG, the largest insurance company in the history of the world. Of course, when we started making money, we gave it back to the people who got into trouble. Now, it may be that at some point down the line, that doesn't happen if things proceed in this way, and some of those companies stay public. Public ownership, by the way, and I was really amazed when I discovered this, and there's a chapter in the book, public ownership is very common around the world. It's all over the world, lots of airlines, lots of banks, lots of healthcare systems. It's very conventional now. It isn't a big deal in most countries. Here we still go, oh my God, it's communism. but enterprise utilities being, big companies being, or internet service, telephone service, television, that's very conventional in many parts of the world. And it turns out, by the way, contrary to common opinion, it is on most indices equal or more efficient on balance than a private corporation. Not even accounting for the fact that big banks and healthcare systems can generate trillions of dollars in costs, as we have learned in the last crisis. Just efficiency alone, the public corporations are turning out to be pretty interesting. Harvard Business Review just did a study, or did a review on it. Leaving aside that the big banks can drop trillions of dollars in costs on the public. Leaving aside that, and leaving aside that the healthcare system can drive massive costs onto the public that are total waste and produce bad outcomes. So efficiency, that's kind of an interesting word. Those old ideas. So if you think this is all kind of socialism, yeah, I don't know, very interesting. That's maybe what you want to call it, or is it an American community sustaining kind of, very American kind of thing? Something is a bubbling, which is very American, very decentralized, kind of odd, kind of weird, and maybe we'll go someplace. Maybe. Maybe not. But the pressures that are creating it, I think, are of great interest. In virtually every area, there are opportunities for serious citizen action locally. To get, for instance, you want to do something locally? You got hospitals and universities here. Go do it in Cleveland. Get the mayor involved. The mayor will look good. The mayor in Cleveland looks great. He's done really fabulous things with his power. Used it that way, and all of a sudden, he didn't know that when he started. Every mayor can look good, and you can help them. They don't know about this stuff. You want to do something, want to get involved in the public banking system, learn about it. You can go out and get on the internet. There's all kinds of information on this. My own view is minimally, well, my own view is the pendulum ain't going to swing. I'm come out of liberalism. We used to think the pendulum swings every little while. I don't believe that anymore. I believe that it came from power, and what the essential power base was labor, and the labor base is gone. So I don't think the pendulum's going to swing. We may get little tweaks up and down. I'll take whatever I can get. But I think the trends are going to continue, and that what is important and interesting is walk on, the Chinese have a great phrase. I love this phrase from the Chinese. They say, you really have to walk on two legs. I think traditional politics, or what's called liberalism, the support of liberal goals, is very important. Whatever can be done at the level of traditional politics to hold back the pain. And simultaneously, develop the basis, maybe, of the next great transformation. Maybe. Now, it all happens to be good stuff to do anyway, so there's not too much to lose. But there is a far more interesting possibility here. And it's, one never knows about history. Revolutions do occur. The Berlin Wall does fall down. Apartheid did end. Those farmers and small merchants in the American in the 1800s did, in fact, with their little flintlock guns, defeat the most powerful empire in the history of the world. Things do happen now and then that are very transformative. So minimally, I see this developmental possibility with my hard hat politicians, I've been there, done that hat, as very useful stuff to do to bolster a traditional progressive agenda. And maybe even, this is an interesting flicker for you political scientists, maybe even these institutions, worker-owned companies, co-ops, land trusts, all this stuff growing locally, develops constituencies, not just services, that begin to provide an institutional base, not just a political base, for politics to offset the decline of unions. I just said something complex. The development of alternative institutions with a quasi-public future and a democratization thrust may also create institutional power to help countervail, like the unions did, but maybe even new theory. Think about Vermont, which is going to ease the insurance companies out of the healthcare business and put in a single payer. Maybe not only to countervail, but to displace, like the Bank of North Dakota. There's a different theory of power. Nonetheless, either way you look at it, there may be a possibility here of either laying the ground for a transformation, or maybe bolstering a different progressive politics, and certainly giving power to the kind of vision I saw in the report you all did, and maybe giving muscle to politics to achieve the kind of goals that I heard talked about at this conference. Maybe. Now, I'll give you a couple more pieces. I'll give you a negative and a positive. So I'll give you another way to think about what could happen. See, I'm from Wisconsin. I grew up with Joe McCarthy in the state. You all know who Joe McCarthy is? I've been in the South for 4 days. I'm saying you all. I've been doing a book tour in the South, so I'm saying you all of a sudden. Anyway. You all know about Joe McCarthy, yes? Okay. It was deeply anti, and I'm from Wisconsin, where Joe McCarthy was, so anything in the state of Wisconsin was 10 times as bad. Anything that moved, they shot politically. High school teachers say, anything modestly liberal, boom, fired. It was really bad. So if you lived in the state of Wisconsin in the 1950s, and you kind of looked at the tea leaves of the times, what you absolutely knew for sure, nothing could really change. For sure. This is really, and then the 60s exploded. Civil rights, feminism, environmental movement, anti-war movement, all that came out. So something was bubbling that the actual political science professors I was studying with didn't know about, as I certainly didn't know about. But that is a common phenomenon. The women's movement popped out of all. Where did it come from? Something was going on beneath the surface. That does not mean it will happen. It means you ought to be cautious about predictions that nothing can ever happen. We'll see. We'll see. I don't know. Maybe. I don't like predictions of inevitability, including that nothing can ever change, which is a prediction of inevitability that is in every newspaper all the time by implication. It's always going to be this way, nothing can ever change. So we'll see. As a historian, I think that's nonsense. That isn't the way I read history. And it is also the case that nothing may change. So I'm very neutral on that question. It's also possible, as the woman here said, that the pain levels will increase and there'll be violence and there'll be repression and something like fascism, like in South America. If the pain continues, there will be violence. We haven't seen any yet. The only violence we've seen is white violence, Oklahoma City. We haven't seen brown or black violence yet. And when that happens, or if it happens, there will be repression. And the question is not whether, it's a question of how severe. So that may be part of the picture of a decaying country as well, decaying system. But take a look at Latin America. People say, oh, it's going to be, yes, it was terrible, and it could be terrible, but if you actually look, people who were serious, people who were serious, knew that that was not the end of history. And if you look at Latin America, where are those dictators? They're gone. Somehow. So if you're thinking about these kinds of questions, that too is a question to confront. Where this might go, even into the worst scenario, historically that may not be the end of history. So, lots of things we could talk about in terms of policy. I'm probably getting to the end of your patience with all this stuff. But it is a suggestion to you that the values that are reflected in the conference and in your report, I think are great values, and many of the policies and discussions of that report are wonderful. And I urge you also to pay some attention to what's happening in this so-called exploding, get underneath the press and find out what's happening. Because just possibly before your eyes, and I am jealous of you, young people, you may be the generation that can create the basis of the next great transformation. If you get serious. I mean deadly serious. You are playing with people's lives. So this stuff is not just about what's nice to do in politics. It's about whether you can change the trends that are setting the terms of reference for millions of people's lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for a fantastic talk. Do you want to take a few questions from the audience? Do you have any questions?
Sure.
Is there any supposition on your part that, I read these suggestions and they seem very grassroots or locally based, that kind of thing? Is there a supposition on your part that the federal system is not worth troubling with? Because it remains relevant.
No, I'll take whatever I can get at the national level. But I think where the real action, the interesting action to me, is rebuilding the base of American politics. So yes, that's kind of a priority.
Well, let me ask you this, and I've been waiting for a forum in which to ask this question. I think this is the right forum. It seems to me, and don't everyone turn off your brain as soon as I say these two words, but it seems to me that the Tea Party has the right idea but the wrong cause, being taxes or whatever it is. It's taxes for them, right, and power of the federal government. But it seems that a minority, if I read correctly, of folks have essentially shut down Congress, in addition to the money that's in the politics and all of that. So would it not be possible for a committed polity to agree that our problems in Washington are structural, constitutional issues, that if we do not change those structural problems, we will never regain a government of, for, and by the people? And so we would have something like call whatever, a coalition of voter of America, whereby one of any party, Democrat, Republican, Independent, could do as the Tea Party has done and require absolute, and this is the issue, absolute fealty to a set of principles. I don't know what they are, but perhaps we start with public funding of elections, and then corporations are not people. I don't know what the list is, but we have a list which is essentially an order of business for Congress, and we run candidates who swear their fealty to this oath, order of business, and if they don't do it, they're out. And the Tea Party's been very effective in doing that for their cause. But can we do that on behalf of our republic?
So, of course, I don't know the answer. I mean, that it's speculative, in other words.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think that the power base, I think that there's a lot of money behind the Tea Party. It's not just the Tea Party, there's a money base and the corporate base, and there's a lot of structural, institutional support for that particular thing. And I don't think you're going to be able to put that together with the other side. That would be an interesting contention. And so we could have a long discussion about it, but my basic answer is that the institutional base is not there, although you might have some sentiment base. Short answer. Questions? Third. I want some young questions too. I don't want to take us old timers.
Anchor institutions,
Yeah.
okay? Universities, medical, eds and meds. How do you get them to emulate what the University of Pennsylvania has done in West Philadelphia? Very, very successful. About 25% of the Penn budget gets spent in West Philadelphia. I don't know about Maryland. I can tell you the University of Tennessee does not get as civically engaged as I think it could. And I think that what you're talking about for me is up here. I operate at a much lower level. I got to see things happen. So I want to see school kids get into an opportunity where they'll make the money that you'll talk about, that they'll have access to power, that we'll take that triangle that C. Wright Mills talked about and flatten it out.
So, the question of what you do in this university or any university is being posed around the country now by many, many students.
Yep.
And they're raising the question primarily of climate change. And why are you investing in things that would produce dirty climate? But the issue of where the university buys and what it invests in, all that is on the agenda in some parts of the country. And you can do that. Now it's work, and they will resist, but some of them will realize they look pretty good if they do stuff like that too. So it's not a closed door. That doesn't mean it's being done now, but that's a really ripe one. And it's ripe. Let me tell you another one. Hospitals. This is really, you need to know this fact if you want to do this, because that's where the big bucks are, and that's where the big purchasing power is. Hospitals, or nonprofit hospitals, are required by law because they're nonprofit charitable institutions under the nonprofit 501c3 code. They have to do a certain amount in terms of health care a contribution to the community. That's required of the nonprofit status. That's the law. Mostly they have seen that as kind of helping out some poor people in healthcare. Under the new Obama regulations just issued 2 months ago, the health of the community, we know by thousands of studies, depends significantly on its economic health. And that these institutions, in paying and doing what they need to do under the law, can satisfy that requirement by helping the economy of the local community in some way that helps the low end. That's a big deal. It's an opening. You guys want to play? That's a big opening. The Obamacare, you had it before. They could do it, Case Western Reserve, and couldn't do it without that. But now the law requires them to do something, and it can also be of the kind we're talking about for anchor institutions. And they are a powerful basis of doing real stuff, real jobs. Yes?
I've been really interested in you saying that, like, students have to do something about this, that we can do something about this. So if you had a group of students, what would you say, like, the real first steps that we would have to take to make something like Cleveland happen here?
Well, I think first you have to learn about it, and you can get on the net. It's called the Evergreen Corporations, Evergreen Co-ops. And you can find, oh, here's a website, www.community-wealth.org. Put the dash in because there's one without, and that we just survey this stuff. It sort of tells you all about whatever you want to know. These different sectors, we just survey what's going on. So you can find that. You can find out about Evergreen. You can find out what the universities are doing there. You can find out what, and then you can say, well, we can start talking about the students and start talking about the faculty and the administration. You're saying, why don't we do that? You can talk to the mayor. You're going to see the mayor in about 4 days. Yes? She's open to this. You give her a little nudge. She didn't know about this either. People don't know. There are no newspapers. She didn't know, but she's an old, you know, she used to work for Cesar Chavez. Did you know that? Your mayor, you probably knew that, worked for Cesar Chavez. She was an organizer. She's hip. She wants to do good things. People don't know about what they can do. So, you know, nudge her. You know, tell her you want to do that. Tell her you could, that's not impossible. You could do that at this university. Go for it. And minimally, you'll learn how to do it. And you'll be able to do it someplace else. Who else? John, my friend John Stewart. From old Senate days.
Yeah, well, Knoxville really is very fortunate in the midst of all of this nonsense that surrounds us in the state of Tennessee, and there's a lot of nonsense. I mean, we're going to break records for nonsense. But in Knoxville, Madeline O'Hara is a terrific mayor, and she's better prepared to be mayor than I think almost any mayor Knoxville has ever had. And wonder of wonders, the city council is pretty good too.
Oh.
There are, it's not a large city council, but there are about 4 or 5 really serious people on the city council. And the others who aren't as serious are not nasty either.
Mm-hmm.
So the state, however, and particularly the legislature, and I can't help but, when we were in Harvard together, we had an 18-month.
We also were at Harvard, yes.
We had an 18-month-old toddler running around. His name was Michael. Today he's in the Tennessee legislature.
There you go.
Mike Stewart.
Great.
And he's, you know, and he is surrounded by crazy people.
Yeah.
And they,
I'm from Wisconsin. Been there, done that.
So the point is that if something's going to happen, I think we've got a lot better shot at it happening here in Knoxville.
Great.
With good leadership and a good city council, and you know, and elements of progressivity in the business community.
So grab this guy and make him go to work for you.
Yeah.
He knows how. He's an old pro, and he's right. You can do things.
So I think Knoxville has a real opportunity.
Yeah, you could see. It is possible in a city. I don't know Knoxville, but from what you say, it is possible in some cities to really take these ideas and blow them wide open. You know, I mean, I'm just giving you the tip of the iceberg. Figure out what you want and do it. And then somebody else will say, wow, did you see what they did in Knoxville? Why can't we do it here? That's exactly what Cleveland has done. That's how it works. If you got the opportunity here, I think the problem the mayor faces, as any mayor, any public official faces, They got too many pressures, they don't have time to learn, they don't really have time and expertise, have a big enough staff, so they depend on outside people coming in with knowledge and keeping on them. They depend on that, they need you to nudge them with new information. It isn't like, and this mayor particularly seems really, as you said, I mean, we spent a couple hours with her today, she seems really very hip, very sophisticated, knowledgeable. She's been there, done that, and she's on your side. So, you know, that's an open door, push it wide open.
And she's politically very smart. She ran for mayor once before against the current governor, who then was mayor of Marshall. Not a bad mayor either. She almost beat Haslam, which would have been an extraordinary accomplishment.
Yeah, she's very interesting, and very smart. But notice, what I really want to emphasize is these ideas have to be practical. And they are deeply practical because people have done their homework and done their research. We're not talking about airy-fairy rhetoric. We're talking about very developed, concrete proposals that make sense. And don't mess with it if you're not prepared to do your homework and come up with a serious idea. Someone used the word, I want to deal with a couple of words that came up at the dinner with the students. Someone used the word socialism. Because it's all going to be called socialism. But did you notice the latest 3 polls in a row recently? Rasmussen, I think, was the latest one. That people under 30, 18 to 30 range, react more favorably to the word socialism than capitalism. It blew my mind. That word is, when John and I were, that word was for Bolton. You couldn't talk, that word is great. Now it's kind of belongs to socialism. Doesn't mean anything. So don't worry about being called socialist, it doesn't matter. And besides, so one last thing, don't trust me if I ever say one last thing. Are there any other questions?
This is TVA land.
I want to ask one.
Yeah, over here, yeah, TVA land.
The community-owned enterprise has been successful in abandoning the endless growth model of corporate capitalism as well. You mentioned that in Beyond, I think America Beyond Capitalism, that it was very important for these corporations as they move forward and become more participatory to lose that inherent growth structure.
So here, now that was a really interesting, that's a design question. So allow me, thank you.